How's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Welcome back for the latest Free Agent Frenzy show here on YouTube, but it's also a collaborative version of our Bleav in Queens podcast that you get not only here on WardyNYM, but also wherever you get your audio podcasts. That's Google, Spotify, you name it. Make sure to go out and check it, rate, review, all that great stuff. We have a massive episode tonight. Myself, WardyNYM here on YouTube. You guys know me. That is Anthony Recker, former New York Met, now turned MLB Network analyst. Joe Sorrell will be here shortly, and we're also going to be having on the show live in San Diego from the winter meetings, that being Mets beat reporter in Pat Ragazzo. So a lot to get into, guys. We saw Jacob deGrom is no longer a New York Met, and already the Mets have filled the void for that ace role with a multi-award winning, that being Cy Young Award winner, World Series winner for the second time here with the Astros, that being in Justin Verlander. So we're going to be sharing our raw reactions to the JV signing, what this means for the Mets now. Was this the right move for them overall? Him, especially with deGrom out of here. What moves are on the horizon for the Mets as they are not done with starting pitching? Brandon Nimmo updates on him. A lot of craziness going on live here in the winter meetings, but we have a lot to get into. But before we get any further, I just want to shout out everyone here on the live chat here on YouTube. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe on. Greatly appreciate, folks. If we have time, we'll try to get to some questions at the end of the show. And of course, have to let you all know that today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs. So make sure you head over to betonline.ag using promo code Bleav at BLEAV. That way you get a 50% off welcome bonus. BetOnline, it's where the games begin. And now, folks, let's let the show begin. All right. Rec, my goodness, I know you sprinted to get here. I mean, Joe, he thought he was going to be here on. We thought that we were going to be perfectly on time for this one, but just like every other show, it never works that way, does it?
No, real life gets in the way, and nobody wants to know what I've been dealing with the last 48 to 72 hours. You do know, Tyler. Unfortunately,
no one wants to know. I agree with you.
Nobody else wants to know what I've been dealing with. So we'll just leave it at that and say that, yep, I'm glad to be here. That's all I got for you on that front. As far as, are we getting straight into Verlander? Is that what we're doing?
Let's get right into this one because we haven't even recorded yet since deGrom left. So before we even got a chance to do a singular episode about Jake, now already the Mets filled the void there. So for you, I want to first ask, what was your reaction to deGrom leaving? I know that I'm not even going to lie, Rec. I was ranting about you a little bit when I was talking about it the other day, because that's when you texted me. I'm not going to say I didn't tell you so, and you did. I get it. But one, I know you feel good about that at least being right. Two, I want to know, how do you feel about Justin Verlander? I know you're joking. I want to know.
No, I really don't. I really wanted Jake to come back and be a Met. This is what's funny. This is what's funny. So I go on Twitter. I go online when I speak, when I'm on MLB Network. I haven't gotten to speak about this stuff on there yet. I'm on later this week. I always say what I truly feel, and I try not to let any of my raw emotion or my desires, or I try not to let that get in the way. Sometimes it does, and I'll try to be transparent about that too. When I said on this show and a couple times on the network that deGrom, I don't think he's coming back, it wasn't because I didn't want him to.
Oh, I know.
It was just because
I know.
I truly felt like the fit for him was going to be better elsewhere, not because I didn't want him to be a Met. I would have loved to see him finish his career as a Met. So I wanted to be wrong in that respect. Like, I really did. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to text you and say, you were right, Wardy, I was wrong, because I would have loved to see this guy come back and continue what he started here, continue what they're building here, and move forward with it. I guess, excuse me, this is part of what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess the part of me that's dumbfounded, and maybe you can help me with this, is the fan who's saying, and there's a lot of them, good riddance to deGrom, you've been hurt, you weren't worth that many years. Like, what did people say when Wheeler went to Philly? Oh, not worth the money, not worth all those years.
And I was not one of those fans.
Stop it. Yeah. deGrom is one of the best to ever do it, to ever toe the rubber. Not for the Mets, not for in the NL, just period. all time. He has that ability. He has shown it at times. Has it been extended? No. Guy didn't get to the big leagues till he was 26 years old or whatever. He hasn't had that kind of a career yet. He hasn't been able to put that kind of a stamp on it. He had a season that was taken, like 2/3 of a season that was taken from him in 2020. And then obviously, yes, for the last 2 seasons, he's dealt with some issues. But if you look before that, this guy was an insanely healthy, consistent, everyday guy, and he pitched at a Cy Young caliber in those seasons. I mean, 2019 is one of the best years, or was it 18? I'm sorry, I'm losing track of my years here. It's one of the best seasons we've ever seen a guy throw, especially in the modern area. I mean, this thing has been compared to Bob Gibson, for gosh sake. I mean, it's crazy. So to me, to say that, oh, he's just injury prone and good riddance and 5 years, 180, that's too much. I don't believe that. I truly don't.
Yeah.
I think you're going to look at these next 2 years and beyond. I think you're going to look at these next 2 years, watch what he does in Texas, and see what Verlander does here and say, I wish we had deGrom. That's not to say that Verlander's going to be bad. I'm not saying that. But deGrom is going to be that good because to me, he is that guy who can consistently pitch, even when he is a little bit hurt. Now, there was a report from Heyman over the weekend after deGrom signed that said that they offered him an extension before the 21 season.
Correct.
For 3 years, right?
Yeah.
In my opinion, it wasn't the contract he already signed. That wasn't what bothered him. That wasn't the issue. I think that extension may have been a slap in the face to him. As you saw, they went and signed Scherzer the next year, a guy who's, 5 years older than deGrom was then, to a 3-year deal. So I'm starting to understand where there was some level of he took offense to that, a little bit of a slap in the face. And I see it. I get it. Like, if I'm him, I'm not saying I want to feel that way, and I'm not saying he wants to feel that way, but there might be some of that. Now, look, when you're talking about this amount of money, I get that people get upset that you're, oh, it's a slap. It's not a slap in the face. They're offering them. It's all about what your market demands and what you've done for this organization. And a guy doesn't have to take a hometown discount just because he came up with you. If anything, the organization should owe him more because that's what the level he's pitched to over all these years. They owe him $50 million a year for all I'm concerned. And I really thought they saw that and they were going to give him whatever it took. So when, the reports came out that they offered him 3 years now, but, didn't really get a chance to go for 5, he probably saw it as, you know what, I already got the 3-year extension offer from you. I already felt disrespected. Someone's giving me the years that I want, or at least more years. I'm going to take that. And I'm okay with that. And it's the nature of who I think Jake is. I think he's just more of a small town, laid back kind of a person. I don't think he, needs to be in New York, and that's okay. I hate it when people get upset that like he's a bad person or a terrible competitor because he doesn't want to do it in New York. He just doesn't want to deal with it. There's a lot that goes on and comes on you for being a Met and for basically feeling the weight of having to carry this organization at times, which Jake has had to do. That's a lot to ask of somebody, and if he doesn't want to do that, all power to him. He's good enough to go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants. I am surprised though that the Mets only offered him 3 years now, because yes, I understand the whole short-term deal. We want to give ourselves an opportunity in 3 years to have younger guys coming up and build the organization a certain way. This guy deserves so much more from you as an organization. He put so much out there. And I shouldn't say that because I hesitate to say things like that because the game of baseball owes nobody anything. But from an organizational standpoint, what he's brought to this organization, signing that first deal, and obviously that he felt was, I guess, what he was worth at the time. Well, he proved differently over the last, however many years of that contract, that he's worth even more than that. And I think he, on some level, must have felt, yeah, like I am worth more than that. I've proven that, and you're not willing to pony that up to a guy who did it here. okay, I'll just go somewhere else. And that's okay. Maybe he didn't take offense to it, but maybe he's just saying, okay, I'm just going to go try it somewhere else. And that's that. I just feel like it's off to the next place. And I'm okay with that. I don't like hearing fans bashing a guy on the way out when a couple months ago you were all about Jake coming back and getting healthy, all about him and Max being the two at the top of your rotation, and you were going to win a World Series. No, it didn't work out. Was that all Jake's fault? Absolutely not. Did he have a couple of bad outings? Sure he did. But it falls on a lot of other shoulders too. The offense disappeared. Max didn't do his job. There's a lot of people that didn't do their job. You could say pretty much the only one who did was Edwin Diaz. He's pretty much the only one that did his job the entirety of the end of the year, at least. So realistically, I just that bothers me. Like that really gets to me. Kicking him on his way out, because he was so much more to this organization.
No, and I agree with you. And before you transition into Verlander, because we have a lot to say there, I just wanted to further add, no, I'm 100% on your wavelength. I don't agree with the notion of the fans that have been writing off Jake right away. But again, everyone's entitled to their opinion. There were people that were like that sayonara with Wheeler as well. I was never like that. And it's good at least knowing that it seems like in this scenario, to a degree, even though that, yes, Jake may have felt slighted by the fact that he was given that contract offer pre-2021 season, and it just wasn't comfortable for him. However, you can also give that argument that at least it's different than the Wilpon Wheeler situation, where the Mets simply weren't even going to go out and do that and then go out and use that money. They weren't going to. With deGrom, it was a trickier situation because from the reporting, they had negotiations with Jake that Thursday night. Then once they got to Friday, as soon as he started to get heavy into negotiations with the Rangers, that was it. It was sayonara. So it seemed like that this was something that had been building up for a while, right? There's been a lot of rumblings that we saw throughout the year that Jake seemed like he was distancing himself more from the Mets. And I tend to agree. When you actually look at it, I agree. He wasn't that same type of jovial as positive pitcher that we've seen. And again, a part of me was thinking, well, it's because he's missed so much time over the past year. He's probably just frustrated, wants to get on the mound and get things cooking and rolling. But you could tell that there was some distancing going on. And I think it's just a shame because now when finally the Mets have an owner that's adamant about being a consistent contender, a team that's going to be in a winning phase for years on end, it felt like the prime time that, okay, that has to sway Jake, right? Because he hasn't had that his entire career other than, 2015, 2016. But the point is that there wasn't consistency there. Now we're finally going to start to get consistency at the Mets level when it comes to having deep runs, going into playoffs, things of that nature. So from Jake's side, you can understand where he's coming from. And from the Mets, you can also say, hey, we were never given the final offer. Would they have won 5 years? I don't think so. I never got that impression from the Mets, mainly because of the fact that they knew.
I think they're crazy if they wouldn't have. And that's just that's.
Yeah. And I wanted Jake, and I would have been in favor if the Mets signed Jake to whatever it was. But again, that's also the homer of me talking that just wants Jake to be in Queens and, be, the next best thing since Tom Seaver, for instance. I want to see a statue of Jake, but that isn't going to happen now. And you could tell, though, that with Jake's connection with the Mets, that wasn't as much a priority as it was for him to, one, make sure he gets the bag, a longer term deal. And again, he's a Jacksonville boy. I see him wearing the cowboy hat. He's going to love Texas. I know that for a fact. And he's probably going to thrive pitching in that stadium specifically as well. So I'm curious to see how the future holds for Jake, but I'm not one of those people that's holding any grudges, if that makes sense. I'm not like that by any stretch. And I disagree with fans that, think that he's a complete traitor, things of that nature. Not every player is going to want to be here for multiple reasons, and we don't know all of them. We don't know. I think the medical staff with Jake too. Did he feel bothered by being so micromanaged over the years? I'm not sure, right? Is that something that factored into things? Not getting run support his entire career. Was that a factor? We don't know. We're never going to know for certain. But what I will say is what we do know is that the Mets, prior to Jacob deGrom even officially leaving, were quote unquote enamored, blown away with Justin Verlander from their meetings. And just like that, reporting came out yesterday, Rec, from Carlos Baerga. And he's a guy that has gotten some things right before, talking about Toronto Blue Jays news and others. He reported on Instagram yesterday that the Mets were finalizing a deal for Verlander, and he was almost perfectly on the money with the deal. Just slightly off, but he had it. So I credit Carlos. And then today it breaks around 5:20, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. I'm in the shower, sprinting out of the shower without contacts in my eyes. I always watch a YouTube video to start my day, and I'm squinting, and I see that the update from Andy Martino that the Mets signed Verlander. So I sprint. I'm going to talk about it on YouTube right away, and we're doing that now. So I am cautiously optimistic with Justin Verlander. And I know that you're going to probably be a heavier critic than I am on him. And while, don't get me wrong, this can definitely be a recipe for disaster if himself and Scherzer don't have the durability that you expect from a 162. But for a Verlander who just came off of Tommy John surgery, who literally at the age of 39 won the Cy Young, pitched just under 200 innings, he's someone that I feel confident is going to even be more durable, I'd argue, than Scherzer for the next year at minimum. And as long as those two hopefully get between 25, close to 30 starts, fingers crossed, I'm liking what I'm seeing here with the Mets. Verlander, it's huge. I love the fact that the Mets were able to get this deal done and fast. They fill their ace. And again, it helps Mets fans that were all crying over Jake over the past couple of days, easily transition. Okay, now we have another ace. Now I'm happy again. So what's your raw thoughts about Justin Verlander signing a 2-year, $86.6 million deal, the same AAV, identical to his former teammate, and now teammate again in Max Scherzer, with a 3rd-year vesting option, which I'm pretty sure I told you and Joe I would be more okay with if it was, say, a vesting option, and it is at 140 innings pitched in his 2nd year. If that hits, then he will be with the Mets for his 3rd year at $35 million.
Yeah. 40, 41, and 42. Those are the 3 years you're getting out of Verlander. Yep. When Jake is done with his 5-year contract, he will be younger than Verlander is today.
Correct.
Okay.
Give me the pros and cons, Rack.
Well, first of all, I love Justin Verlander. His career, everything he's done, been fantastic. He has been lights out, one of the best pitchers of his generation. He's a Hall of Famer, 3-time Cy Young winner, 2-time World Series winner. You can list all those things, right? And I get that. What he did last year was incredible. 175 innings, 1.75 ERA. I mean, one of the lowest ERAs in the modern era. It's incredible what the season he was able to put together. I think it was the 4th best ERA plus since 1990 something. I don't know, since the expansion. It was in the AL. It was an incredible year, and I truly Bleav. It wasn't by fluke. This guy has done it his entire career, and he's had some ups and downs, but for the most part, he figures it out and he does what he needs to do. My reaction is, yes, you lost Jake. So your options were pretty much Verlander or Rodon, right? Like that's it. If you want one of those caliber pitchers, like a top tier caliber pitcher, those were your last 2 left. Yeah. Yes, Bassett's out there. He's great. But if you want a top tier pitcher, that was it. The reason I like Rodon better is similar to the reason I would have liked Jake better. Yeah. Not quite the same, because Jake offered a little bit more in the way of the fact that he's literally the best on the planet when he's healthy. Yeah. And he's done it here. Like, I mean, he's proven he can do it here. And I mean, not that Justin can't, but Rodon coming in, it would be interesting to see. Now that said, Rodon's 30, right?
Rodon's 29, and he's apparently going to get a 6-year deal, more than likely.
Yeah, this is his age 30 season. Correct. Is what I'm saying. Coming up. I'm okay paying a guy in his prime money. Like, I'm okay with that. Verlander is not in his prime. I don't care if he had a 1.75 and that's the best of his career last year. There's something to be said about, yes, taking 2 years off, but there's also something to be said about taking 2 years off and rehabbing for a year and getting your arm probably as strong as it's been since you were 30 years old. But can you repeat that the next year when you don't have that time off and you're not going to be rehabbing again? I don't know. Is he the Tom Brady of baseball, and can he do it till he's, I'll say 44, because this year Tom Brady's not Tom Brady? Maybe, but maybe he's going to be Tom Brady at 45 this year. Maybe he's going to be Tom Brady at 45 next year. And realistically, I don't think that that's what you pay someone $86.6 million for. That's insane. Like, he's making
Scherzer's contract is ridiculous.
1.375.
All these guys' contracts are ridiculous.
Well,
I'm not disagreeing.
Well, the same contract. They're making 1.375 per start. If they make 32 starts, assuming they can do that. I don't think they will. Then you're thinking about, okay, come October, and are they going to be after 32 starts? Because let's not forget, this past season, one of the reasons that Jake and Max might have not been their best come October was because they didn't really, I mean, I know Jake only pitched 11, 12 starts, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
I know he didn't pitch a ton, but I'm sure they wanted to ease him a little more than they had the opportunity to.
Yeah.
They ended up in a dogfight of a division race.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to happen again. Do you think they're going to run away with the division with the Phillies doing what they just did today and
with
thinking what they think about themselves?
11 years,
and now,
$300 million.
And now the Braves, it's not going to be a runaway division. You're going to need these guys all the way down the stretch through September. You are not going to win this thing with 3 weeks left and say, oh, now we can rest. It's not going to look. And the reason I'll give this, if we're grading this, I'll give Verlander an incomplete because you got to see what else happens to this team too. Like, if they don't fix the offense and in my opinion, get more athletic and get more powerful, they're going to have problems. They're not going to be able to do it when they need to do it or put up big numbers when they need to put up big numbers, which is an issue. Then you still need to build a bullpen, right? Like, I mean, I like some of the arms that I'm seeing them, gather, but Carlos Estevez, I think, just went to the Angels today for $7 million a year. That was a great idea by the Angels. This guy has nasty stuff. I saw him in the minor leagues in 2018. He is disgusting. You put him in a new ballpark outside of Colorado, and I don't remember where else he's pitched recently. Like, this guy's really good. He's going to have an opportunity to make a roster and do something. Yes, it's Anaheim. Yes, he's probably going to stink there. That's what happens when you go to Anaheim. But he comes here, and he had a good chance of being really good. Like, that's the kind of stuff I think the Mets are missing out on. But look, they're trying to get the big fish done. They need to fill out this roster. And if they do in a way that signals that Steve Cohen's okay with paying, and you mentioned this earlier in the offseason, $350 million. Wow. And good for you, because it's not going to be just $350 million. After the taxes, it's going to be like $450 million.
Oh, that's the big thing. The Cohen tax is going to kick their ass. And
and you still have all the penalties that they're going on, that they're facing this year. Say they would have signed Rodon, they would have not had. They would have lost more draft picks and worse draft picks, and they would have lost $1 million. That's going to happen again next year. So they're not going to be able to sign any more, qualifying free agents again. Like, I get it, and it's you want to go down that road. That's a CBA thing. The players should have held their ground on certain things. They didn't, whatever. But realistically, I thought they could have done better with the money, and that's where I differ. I think you could have gotten more, even though Rodon would have been more expensive because it would have been more years. He would not have been more expensive on an AAV. He wouldn't have actually been that close, to be honest with you. I think he would have been less than what Jake got. I think he would have been, what did Jake get? Like 37, I think, a year. I think this guy would have been in the roughly $32 to $35 million range a year, AAV wise. So to me, yeah, I would rather have that in the prime of his years, even though he has some injury history, because he's really freaking good. And I could have gotten him for those years. I don't care if it's a longer contract. I'd rather give that and get more of those prime years than potentially $86 million out the window.
See,
which could happen here.
And while I was in favor of Rodon, and I would still love Rodon, now I don't think it's going to happen at this point. I think other teams are going to prioritize him heavier.
No, not at this
longer term. I don't see it happening. What I will say, though, and I think this is in more of defense with the Mets and what they're trying to do here, it's clear that these short-term high AAV type deals and this win now stage for at least the next 3 years, right? No, wait. Just let me finish, Rick.
I am.
The point here is that it would appear that the Mets are trusting what a guy like Max and Verlander can give you on the short term than taking a potential risk even on, say, Jake 5-6 years, Rodon 6 years. Not only I know the draft pick compensation comes in as a factor for them, it 1000% does. And when that thinks otherwise is silly, it has for the Mets since Steve Cohen came into this point, at least. But I really think it's with the fact that these guys are still uncertainties with health. I think the Mets rather take those risks with uncertainties at high AV short term because Cone can handle it without a problem. And then they still have their eyes set on potentially a Shohei Ohtani next offseason. And 2 years from now, there's some massive pitchers that are going to be available in the market that are more reliable, more durable. They could sign to long-term deals. So I really think that all these, there's a lot of factors that are going into the Mets decisions. But I think especially with a guy like Rodon, only having his past 2 years have been great. However, we saw that in his dominant year with the White Sox before he parted, his velo dipped drastically in the second half. He was not fully healthy that year. Finally had one truly fully healthy season now with the Giants, and also what was his walk year. I think the Mets are looking at those factors, and they don't want to take as much of a risk for a long-term commitment on guys, similar to what they've been dealing with Jake in recent years, for example. I think that's the mindset that they have right now. If they're going to have issues, they'd rather be on the short term. That way they can go out and change things as soon as either next year or the following year with the rotation. So, again, I would have loved Jake and Rodon, either of them, 100%. But I'm also not going to look at the Verlander signing as something where, okay, he's about to be 40 years old. He's going to be shelved what he once was. Could he be? Yes. But that is yet to be proven. And I'm going to make a very bold statement right here, Rec. And I pray I'm right. And I'm sure you pray I'm right too. I think Justin Verlander is going to pitch more innings than Jacob deGrom next season. That's my hot take.
I could see that happening. But will he be what you need him to be in October?
And that's has yet to be seen. Yep.
That's where people got mad at me earlier today because I said online, I wanted to be positive about this signing, but I can't be all positive about it. And I was talking about winning now versus sustained success, and I mentioned sustained success, and people latched onto that. I still don't even think this is a great win now move because I don't think the Verlander or Scherzer you're going to get at the end of the year is going to be better than what you. Hi, Joe. Is going to be better than what you get or what you're going to get from either deGrom in October or Rodon, especially Rodon in October. I think Rodon gives you a better shot to be healthy and to be pitching at an elite level in October than either of the two Mets starters do. And that's the problem.
And that's a fair argument.
I see win now in Rodon. And I see sustained success because it's a lower AAV and you can handle it and push it out over a couple more years. It depends on how you want to do business, right? And for whatever reason, right now, the Mets have this like hard line on like 2 or 3 years, which is funny because they gave, Lindor how many years? They're giving Diaz more years. It's interesting that they are putting this line on some of these starting pitchers when I don't think they need to, and I think they're handcuffing themselves in situations where they don't need to. When you talk about Rodon and the draft picks, the problem I have with that is if you sign Rodon, you were already letting Jake go, in my opinion. I don't think you were ever going to have both. So you let Jake go, you got a draft pick for him. If you let Walker go, you got a draft pick for him. You're good. Like, you're fine. You got your 2 draft picks back. I know it's not the same, but in baseball, a second and a fifth compared to whatever they would be, 2/4, something like that. Like, it's like that's the same thing. Who cares? That's even to me. Move on. You're good. You got all your draft picks, and you could sign Bassett back in that scenario, and you're good. You got your 2 draft picks, so you don't have to worry about that. Yes, there's $1 million international money, but come on, like they're spending it elsewhere. I wish they could spend more in the international pool, so in that scenario. But oh well, like you're missing it 1 year, $1 million. You'll be fine. You're the Mets.
Okay. See, I love the different opinions we're getting right now. So, Joe, let's pan to you. How do you feel about, 1, your raw reactions briefly to Jacob deGrom leaving, and 2, the Mets being so quick and responding by signing JV today? And then after we hear your thoughts, then we'll get Pat Ragazzo on the show to break down all the latest live from San Diego for day 2 of the winter meetings.
And 3, Joe, and 3, Joe, how do you feel about your hair right now? Because I think it's an absolute 10.
I don't feel good about it. I don't feel good
it's
about
fantastic.
it at all.
Like that is like
it seemed like a build up for a negative comment. And it was the sweetest compliment. I love that.
No, it's like it's like big and like, yeah, look at me. I'm Joe Serrano.
Being on a football field since 5:30 in the morning, being on set for All American.
Yeah,
it It was quite the day.
Got a little
throwing dimes out there.
Got
QB1, baby. I'm living Zach Wilson's dream life on and off the field right now. So, it's
all right, Joe. Let's hear your thoughts.
With deGrom, I'm kind of in good riddance mode. I got to be completely honest there. Rec, I'm sorry. I know you played with him. I know that you think he's the most talented pitcher on the planet, which when he's healthy he is. But at the end of the day, the guy won 5 games last year, and he didn't want to be a Met. And as more and more reports surface and more information comes out about how he felt about this team, about him making no effort to have a relationship with Steve Cohen, that he was leaving team events early, that he wasn't really developing a relationship with his own teammates.
Of course, this stuff's going to come out now. Where was this stuff last year then, if it's like that big of a deal?
He did always seem disinterested. He did. I mean, he was not like Max in Buck Showalter's ear all the time.
100%.
Engaged 100%.
Because before the 21 season, they offered him a 3-year extension.
Before any of the injuries started. Take the money.
Any of the injury. Wait, what?
I mean, he was 34 years old? Like, that's not 32. A terrible extension.
He's 34 now.
He turned 34 in June, so he was 33 and a half.
No, before the 21 season. So that's
okay.
2 years ago.
So at 32 and a half, he got a 3-year extension that would have kept him a Met, through the age of 38?
35.
Well, the extension would start after.
Oh, it would have started after this year, right?
It would have started right now.
Kept him until he was 37.
38 years old. I mean, it's not a bad deal. Jake, to me, it was just a guy who wanted.
He deserved more than that from this organization. Keep going.
I mean, when is it enough, right? Like, obviously, he's all about the money. He could say he wants to win. Obviously, he's all about the money because he went to Texas, and they're not going to be winning anytime soon. So, I don't miss the guy. I think Justin Verlander is, to Tyler's point, going to give us more innings this year. Will he be as dominant all the time as Jake? No, Jake's the most dominant pitcher in baseball when he's on, but Jake also gave up like 9 earned in 3 innings against the Oakland A's this year. I don't think Verlander ever did that against the Oakland A's this year, and he faced them quite a few times. So I'm okay with this as long as they win now. I agree with your point about sustained success. Having Verlander and Scherzer come off the books at the same exact time, it's alarming. But at the same time, Steve Cohen made $3.1 billion in 2021. So I think that the Mets will be okay.
Here, before we get to you, Rec, because I know you're going to want to respond to this, I did want to thank Pat Metz for the donation here in the live show on YouTube. Thank you so much for that. He says, Nolan Ryan effectively pitched into his 40s, Clemens into his 40s. Why not?
You can erase that Clemens part. You can just cross that Clemens part out and not even and pretend like that's not there. Sorry, Pat Metz, but that doesn't qualify in this scenario.
Clemens was throwing bats into his 40s, right? Piece of shit. I hate that guy so much.
He was also shooting himself up with lots of stuff too.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. deGrom did not want to come back to the Mets. If the Mets still make big moves, who cares how much Cohen spends? And that's a fair point. And I agree with the notion that as long as the Mets make sure that they have a roster that will certainly compete with the Braves and the Phillies, if not be better than both of them by the time we get around to this upcoming season.
Hold up, time out. Before you finish that sentence, it's not just about competing with the Braves and Phillies. Is their goal not to win a World Series?
I know.
Is that not where they're at now? I get it. I get the division. Fine. But you have to beat the Dodgers. You have to potentially beat the Cardinals, who look really damn good and might make a big move still. You potentially have to. I don't know what the Brewers are doing. You never know. Could be good. The Padres, look, they didn't look great, but they kicked our butt in the playoffs, and who knows what they're going to look like by the start of next season.
They were not happy.
Who knows what they're going to look like? And then you have to beat the Astros and anybody else that comes out of that AL. You think the Blue Jays aren't going to get better? You think the Yankees aren't going to get better? You think, well, maybe not the Yankees. Do you think some of these teams aren't going to get better? Like, it's driving me nuts because they don't just have to replace the people they lost. They have to get better. And if you're not going to do it by bringing Jake back, because that was your best pitcher. I don't care that he didn't pitch. I know he didn't pitch, but he's still the best pitcher on the planet. He still gives you your highest ceiling if he's on your team. And the fact that he's not, you've just lowered your ceiling. And I get it. He wanted out. Maybe that's not your fault. But I don't see Verlander as your highest ceiling, especially because he might not be around in October or he may not be pitching his best. He might give up 9 to the damn Oakland Athletics at that point. I don't know. But getting angry. I want them to win. I want them to be able to win a World Series. I want to look at this team in the spring and say they are very well-rounded. They may not be perfect. They don't have to be perfect. You can fix it at some point in the middle of the season, although they haven't really wanted to do that because they still don't want to part with players. But you have got to be pretty darn close. And there's no help coming from the minor leagues still, outside of Alvarez, being your DH, maybe Beatty playing third. You don't know that yet. Vientos, I don't know if they're going to trade him or not. They just talk crap about his defense too much for me to think he's going to be any part of this team. There's no help coming. Maybe a couple of bullpen pieces, but that's it. So what are you going to do to make sure that you're well-rounded and good enough to compete for a World Series next year? And that is where I think Verlander is not the answer, not in my opinion.
For next year, you really feel that way?
Yeah.
Verlander, who?
Rodon. I would rather have Rodon. I think you have a better shot. You're paying him probably $10 million less.
I wanted Rodon more.
But can't we take money out of the equation on that, though? Like, if we're just
I don't know. Do you know full well that Steve Cohen wouldn't have signed an extra player for $10 million, this coming season if he had that extra $10 million? You don't know that. I don't know.
Think signing
he
Verlander
might have a hard line on a number.
I really don't think signing Verlander as opposed to Rodon is going to impact the next starter he signs, because there will be one more starter signed. And
no, that's fine. No. There's going to be another starter. But what about another bullpen piece? A known quantity. What about a really good bench piece? What about an athletic, versatile defender who can help you with a bat? Like, there's ways to spend that $10 million, and I don't think that having Verlander over Rodon and not having that extra piece for the same amount of money makes it. It's the same reason I told you guys I wouldn't have signed Scherzer last year. I would have signed two starters instead of Scherzer last year, and I would have rather had that go. And I would have rather played with that throughout the rest of the season because you're more well-rounded. You have more options. You're less likely to break down at the end of the season because you have two instead of one. It's literally just that simple. And I don't see them. They're going down the same path. Big contract, great. You could have made that two players somehow. Rodon and another player, a lesser player. That's okay. Those still fill out big league rosters.
Do you really think Rodon's as dominant as Verlander, though? I mean, this is a guy who just posted a sub-2 ERA in the American League. Rodon, his strikeout numbers are off the charts, but there were many games where I watched Rodon fail to go past 6 innings, or also from time to time kind of get slapped around out there. I mean, I think he's great, and I would have been.
Do you think you can really count on Verlander to go that deep into games this year? He only pitched 175 innings. Like, don't forget that. He broke down for a little
going
while.
Deep into games this past year, though. He was doing the stereotypical starter of going between 6 and at most 7 innings on average.
And what is wrong with a guy who gives you 6 to 7 innings?
Nothing.
And doesn't give you.
But I'm saying that's exactly what Verlander's more than likely going to do. He's going to give you at minimum 6 probably every 5th day.
That's fine, and I'd rather have Rodon.
Okay.
Because I trust him. It's not about the starts in August. It's about the starts in October. And I trust him to be healthier in October and to give me 6 or 7 really good innings in October. I don't give a crap about the starts in August. I think this team with Verlander or Rodon gets to the playoffs if they fill it out the rest of the way, the right way. I think they get to the playoffs. But I don't think they're giving themselves their best opportunity in October with Verlander. They would have had a better opportunity with Jake, or they would have had a better opportunity with Rodon.
I get what you're saying now more so. It's the fact of the durability down the stretch, right? Because I think for the Mets,
period.
And here's what could perfectly counter your standpoint, Rec. That's if the Mets make sure that they get creative. I've heard from multiple Astros fans that Verlander thrives best in a 6-man rotation, which I don't think they're wrong on. So is that something that the Mets, maybe not so much a 6-man, but at least having guys that they know can eat multiple innings? Like, the Mets need to find themselves Trevor Williams types again for this bullpen / being a number 5 starter. We have David Pearson. We have Tyler McGill, but there's more guys out there as well. And I think that's something that the Mets need to make sure that they address. Am I wrong, Joe, or am I right?
Well, I'll tell you who else thrives in a 6-man rotation, and that's Shohei Ohtani. So if the Mets want to just go out and get him, and then all of a sudden you have Scherzer, Verlander, and Shohei, I'll take that. I'll take that over Jake and Max.
Yeah. And again, it's funny because Ben Verlander, who of course Justin's brother has his own podcast, spoke how excited Verlander isn't joining the Mets. He's excited with how much Steve Cohen has done in a short time, how much that clubhouse has changed, analytically, how much they've changed, because Verlander is heavy with his analytics. But Ben rather, his brother, is like the biggest Shohei lover you will find out there. And he will certainly be doing his fair share of trying to recruit. Not that it's going to matter much on Shohei's end, because it's not like he makes a deal himself. But a part of me feels like that this move to make sure that the Mets get another high-end pitcher on short-term deal is somewhat a factor into pursuing Shohei. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but it feels like that these are factors for sure.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. I mean, look, right now the Mets have 2 aces. It's what they had last year with Jake and Max. Now they've got it with Max and Justin, 2 aces, but 2 aces whose contracts could very well, expire by the end of the 2024 season. 2 aces who could leave at the same time. So even though a trade seems more and more unlikely, I think the door is definitely still open for next offseason to give him. I think that's where Steve Cohen would go for a long-term deal. I think he'd give Ohtani a potential long-term deal, have Max, have Justin for 1 year together with him, and then have him as the ace moving forward.
Or it maybe the trade deadline. I think, Rec, when you think for a second about the trade deadline and what the Mets didn't do, how underwhelming it was, I think something that bothers me now more looking back is the fact that it seems like Jake was going to be gone regardless. So just further reasons as to why you should go out and do the absolute most you can at the deadline. Yes, the Mets didn't have gaping holes in every area, but they had 2 major issues, the DH and also making sure that they had enough in that bullpen. 2 things I felt that they didn't address enough while looking back this past year. So when you look ahead for next season, for example, would you argue that's almost in the best fit for the Mets to go all in at the deadline for a superstar, even if he's a rental, like a Dodgers situation that we've seen with Max and Turner? Maybe not to that same degree, but landing a superstar of an area of need potentially when you know that you have such a short window with Scherzer, who has that opt-out after this upcoming season, and Verlander, who's at minimum going to be here for 2 years.
It's going to depend on where the team's at in the situation.
Yeah.
And it's terrible to say that. I want to be able to give you an answer, but
no, you're not wrong.
I'm going to need to see Max and Justin at that point. I'm going to need to see the records in the division, know how much of a lead they have. Will they be able to rest them? I don't think they're going to be able to. This division's going to be insane. I think Miami's going to be – I thought they were going to be better last year. They weren't. I still think they could be better this year with that staff they could potentially put together. If Edward Cabrera is healthy all year, if Sixto Sanchez shows up back on the face of the planet at some point, and obviously with Sandy Alcantara, I don't know if they're trading away Lopez or any of these other guys, Jesus Luzardo. If they keep all those guys, though, look, yes, the Mets rate Pablo Lopez. Outside of that staff is ridiculous. I think there's just so many things that go into that. I don't want to say and commit myself to, they should go out and get the most expensive rental because they have a shot, because I don't know how I'll feel come, August 1 or July 31, whatever it is. So I'm going to need to see more about that. I get nervous when we talk about thinking about, I guess, the trade deadline and knowing that in my back of my mind, I don't think either of these top 2 starting pitchers are going to be great for me in October. And so what am I really going to need to add to this team to make them a World Series, challenger? And that's somewhere that's why I don't like this move as much as I would another, because those questions enter my mind because of it.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, I know that we're going to be.
I love Justin Verlander, though, guys. I do. I still think he's going to be really good. I think he could put up better numbers in Citi Field. I'm not looking at the chat. I really do.
For your own mental, don't.
It's fine. I think he really could be fantastic for a good portion of the season. I'm just not sure. He's going to be the guy in October because of his age and the wear. And if he is, good. I'm glad I'm wrong. Literally, if that happens, good. I'm okay with that. It's the same thing with Jeff McNeil last year. I wanted to trade him. I wanted to kick him out of here. It had nothing to do with his performance. All those people who hate me and are like, oh, look at him, he's got a batting title. Almost won a batting title, whatever. I don't even remember. Did he win it? I don't even remember.
Yeah, he did.
He did. Okay. I don't even care. It had nothing to do with that. It was all about his attitude. Well, he was better this year. Like, we saw a different Jeff McNeil. Yay! Like, I'm okay saying, like, I was wrong. I love that. I'm so glad that I was wrong, but he was able to change. I wanted that for him. He just wasn't showing me he could do it. He finally did it. Yay! He's here. I'm glad. Like, I'm okay being wrong. I'm okay if I'm wrong that Verlander saying that I don't think he's going to be the Verlander, everyone expects in October. I hope I'm wrong. That's just my gut instinct. And so that's what I'm speaking.
Love that. Okay, well, without further ado, let's bring in now our live reporter in San Diego at the winter meetings, that being a Mets beat writer, Pat Ragazzo. Pat, how you doing, my man? Well, look at you all spiffy. How you doing, brother?
Thanks, man. Special occasion. I'm doing great. How are you guys doing? Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no, we're doing awesome. We've been having some heated debates, discussions about the Mets with their status of their rotation right now, as we saw Justin Verlander sign that new deal today. So for you, before I ask you about specific players regarding the Mets and the MLB as a whole, what has the experience been like? Because I know that this is your first time at the winter meetings. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The experience has been pretty cool so far. I mean, there's a lot of people here, pretty much all hands on deck from every department, from executives, scouts, agents, writers, everybody is here for the most part. The Mets got things going today, of course, with signing Verlander. So that's heated up the hot stove a little bit for you there.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I know that you saw the Justin Verlander news that came out earlier today. Obviously, that's big news to replace Jacob deGrom in the rotation right away. But what have you heard about since then regarding the Mets and adding at minimum one more starting pitcher? Kodai Senga, Jameson Taillon, those pitchers. What have you heard at this point?
Well, yeah, they're in on those guys. They've showed continued interest in Kodai Senga. They tried to close a deal with Jameson Taillon last week and weren't able to do so. And Taijuan Walker is another guy who they've showed interest in, who earlier on they checked in on him before pursuing the top level starters. But I imagine that they'll circle back to Taijuan Walker as well as Chris Bassett, who they'd also like to retain.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when I think about the Mets and their rotation, Kodai Senga is someone that I personally would really love to see if they can get it done. I know he's going to cost a multi-year deal for sure. Joe, especially for you, is Senga someone who you would prefer over, say, the Taillons, the Bassets, the Walkers? Then you have the even lesser guys that aren't bad pitchers, but you don't know how much you're going to get in the Striplings, the Heaney's, etc.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I've already made it abundantly clear I don't want Jameson Taillon on this roster. Senga's a big question mark. I feel like Bassett's much more of a sure thing, but with Chris Bassett, obviously he wants a multi-year deal. The Mets clearly seem reluctant to do that, and Bassett's getting up there in age already. So Bassett versus Senga, you have to weigh the pros and cons. But Pat, I'm actually right now a little more interested in position players because Brandon Nimmo and Aaron Judge are by far the best outfielders on the market. Huge decline after that. What's your gut telling you? I know Nimmo is actually in San Diego right now for winter meetings. Do you feel like there might be some substantial progress made this week? Do you feel like the Mets are looking at other options? I saw that Yasiel Puig, not that he is a perfect replacement. I saw he's also at winter meetings right now. What are you thinking about the position player market?
Well, when we asked Billy Epler about that today, he said there's still dialogue between the Mets and Brandon Nimmo. But from what I've heard, Nimmo's market's very robust, and there's about 8 to 10 teams that are in on him. So there's certainly significant competition there. Losing Nimmo would be a significant blow to the Mets, who would have a hard time replacing him. Their options are potentially moving Starling Marte and Mark Canha to center, but that's a lot of wear and tear to play center field when you're both players approaching their age 34 season. So Nimmo is a player who they're still in on, but there is a lot of competition there. And Billy Epler, he didn't say who, but he said that they've even touched base on a couple of infielders as well. So the Mets are going to have to get creative there if they lose Nimmo. They definitely certainly need to add in the position player side as well as pitching.
And before I turn it over to Rec, have you seen any other big name players? I know it's not too common for big name free agents to be at winter meetings in person, but we've already heard of a couple guys out there. Have you seen anyone?
I have not seen anyone strolling the lobby, but I did hear that Yasiel Puig was there, and I know Brandon Nimmo's here as well.
Okay. All right, Rec, Do you got anything for Pat before I ask?
I want to answer the question. I finally figured out how to use the comment, the chat thing.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
well, I didn't realize all you had to do is click on comments. So I want to get to this first because it involves you, Pat. So I want to make sure, we get this out here. Did you see the comment I'm talking about?
No.
Wardy, I don't know how to show this. How do I do this? Do I just click on it? How does that work?
No. What comment is it?
Is that the donation?
Grant. Yep.
Oh,
Grant.
Donation. Oh, Grant. Okay. Shout out Grant here on YouTube. That's Jenny Metz.
There we
Phenomenal
go.
Metz Twitter page. Make sure to check them out.
Good.
There we
okay,
go.
I'm glad Pat can see this too.
That's a good question.
So, whose hair looks better? I'm gonna say, they're pretty similar styles. Actually, I like this right now. I'm gonna go. I really like Joe's when he signed on, but it's getting a little bit out of control over here on the side.
Little
I'm gonna go with Pat. I like Pat's hair. I think Pat's got it. I think he wins this one. Plus, he's got the jacket.
Right.
I mean, the man's he's doing it right. He's in San Diego, for God's sake. Not that Joe's in a bad place, but still, Pat wins.
Just a few miles up
Rack.
I-5, but okay.
Okay.
Of course. So I'll get to my question real quick because we've touched on a couple of things already, right? Starting pitchers. Joe went position player. I'm gonna go. I think they need the most help right now in the bullpen.
Bingo.
Are you hearing anything? Like, what are they gonna do to really fill out this bullpen? Because it's not just a back end piece, right? Like they need some pieces. They need some versatile guys. They need maybe a lefty. They need several pieces to really put this thing together. Just let me know kind of what you're hearing on this front.
From what I've heard, they've touched base on just about every single relief pitcher on the market. Just that side of the market has not moved yet. Andrew Chafin is a guy who they've had interest in since last year. They tried to trade for him at the trade deadline, and then they're going to have interest in him currently as well as he's a free agent again. Another name that I kind of keep hearing is Aroldis Chapman, maybe taking a flyer on him. I don't know how serious or how serious his market is, but I mean, that could potentially be one way for the Mets to fill out their bullpen if they can get Chapman on a cheap deal and not have him be a setup man. And of course, he wouldn't be the closer if you have Diaz, but he might be like a kind of nice middle relief option to have, or just players like that where they're going to have to get some of these flyers and get something out of these guys who maybe are not going to cost as much. Because I know that they want to keep Adam Ottavino, of course they do, but they're not going to get him at the 1 year, $4 million deal that they signed him to last year. They had a great year. He had a great year for them out of the bullpen this year, and he's going to cost a lot in free agency this year. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to keep Ottavino, but they're going to have to sign a couple guys here and start filling out that bullpen.
I think John just spoke for all of us, by the way.
Yep.
Chapman.
Yep. He spoke for me.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. That's interesting to hear about Chapman. I can't say I'm surprised. Again, the Mets, it's important for them to do their due diligence with literally everyone out there. In the scenario where the Mets landed Chapman, I would be very conflicted on my feelings. Yes, you land a flame-throwing lefty, but someone who has been the opposite of reliable in recent years. That's a tough one for me. But Pat, before I get you out of here, I just want to ask a couple more things, especially with the Mets right now and the rotation aspect. Are you under the notion that one, Rodon is not going to happen now, I'd imagine, right after landing Justin Verlander? And two, evaluating, the pursuit of Jameson Taillon, for example. The Mets went really hard after him. Obviously, I know Joe isn't as high on Taillon as I am. I think when it comes to simply just upside and his elite command, he's one of the best starting pitchers in baseball with command in the zone. But for you, one, what have you heard about Carlos Rodon to this point? And two, when evaluating that next starter to land, do you have a gut feeling that there's any favoritism with one player over the other right now?
I don't think that my gut doesn't tell me that there's favoritism with one player or the other right now. With Rodon, though, they have had interest in him. They've met with him, of course. But signing Verlander pretty much all but takes them out on Rodon. I think that with their luxury tax right now, they're at $289 million. So they're only $1 million below the Steve Cohen tax, which of course they're going to go over this year. But they're going to blow past it already. Yeah. So I don't think that they'll be able to give Rodon the contract that he's looking for. I've heard the Yankees are seriously in on Rodon, as are the Dodgers and some other teams as well. So I think that with the Verlander deal, it kind of all but takes them out on Rodon.
And one last thing from me, at least, and that is Andrew Benintendi. I know that reports came out earlier today that the Mets have been showing interest in Andrew. He's someone that I know they also pursued back at the trade deadline. Of course, he went to New York, just went to the Bronx. Had that one really good game in the Subway Series against Max Scherzer. Of course, I was in attendance for that game. And then not long after that, Benintendi went down with injury and wasn't able to help impact the Yanks in the playoffs. So, Andrew Benintendi, do you think he's someone that's actually a feasible fit for the Mets in the scenario where Brandon Nimmo is gone?
I do, because of the type of player he is. He's a pure contact hitter. He's got speed. He's a Gold Glove caliber outfielder. I do think that would be a pretty good fallback option if they do lose Nimmo. It's just it doesn't solve your center field problem, where, again, it would have to be Marte or Canna splitting time, or they'd have to sign a Kevin Kiermaier or trade for someone and rotate Marte, Canna, and Benintendi between the corner outfield spots and DH. So I do think it would be a good move if they lose Nimmo, but again, it wouldn't solve the biggest problem in center field.
100% agree. All right, Joe Rec, any final comments you got for Pat before we get him out here?
Yeah, Pat, I appreciate all the insight and your time, man. Just last thing for me, back to the bullpen. How likely do you see a potential reunion with Trevor May? I mean, Trevor's been really vocal on social media, obviously all year, whether he was, active or inactive on the IL, about how much he loves this team, how much he loves being a New York Met. I saw some really impressive flashes from him late in the season that made me really want a reunion there. Do you think that it's something that's realistic?
I think when healthy, he's a really solid pitcher, and he's somebody who could factor in as a setup man. And based off the injury-riddled season that he had, I think that they could have him for pretty cheap. So yeah, I don't think that it's impossible that they bring back May. He's not going to get big money based off the injury-plagued season he just had.
I think for me, last thing I got for you, and I, again, appreciate your time, Pat. We haven't touched on this at all because it's not something that people talk about much. It's the Mets making a trade, right? Is there anything that you see as a real possibility? Brian Reynolds, they're not trading for Brian Reynolds. A real possibility of someone that they, could make a move for, or are there any trades that you've kind of heard discussed, or maybe pique your interest, guys that might pique your interest in a trade?
That's a tough one. I've not dove into the trade market too much, but I mean, if they can't get the starter that they want with how hot the starting pitching market is, they could potentially look to trade for a starter. It just depends on what teams are going to give up, and it's kind of hard to forecast that right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's the fun part about that area, and we know the Mets don't want to trade top prospects, but at the same time, I don't envision them not making a trade before next season, right? Something on the big league level. I just feel like they have to with where they're at. So there's a lot of different ways they can go, but I do think there's still real value in either A, starting pitchers, or B, a potential power bat somewhere on the trade market that isn't going to cost you a top 5 prospect, and something that I think the Mets could swallow. So just wanted to see your insight on that. But again, that's one of those like dream scenarios. It could be a million different players, so you never know what's coming.
Well, just take a look at last year too, where they needed a starting pitcher and they went out and they traded for Chris Bassett. So we could see something like that if they can't get what they want on the free agent market, or if they lose Nimmo and they need another bat. And I agree with you. The power is an area that they struggled in last year, and definitely could insert more into the lineup. I know they're very fixated on run creation, but that is, kind of how you do solve that problem of run creation. And especially if you lose some of your bigger name pitchers, you need to have offense there. And especially if you're going to compete with the Phillies now, they got Trey Turner, and they have a monster lineup there. So, I think that maybe starting pitching and, maybe power could be something they could explore on the trade market. I agree with you there.
Yeah, a lot more things to be had this offseason for the Mets. I'm sure it's going to continue to be a hectic week. And Pat, for you, I hope it's a hectic but a fun, entertaining one at the winter meetings. We want to thank you so much again for coming on the show. We greatly appreciate it. For people that don't know, Pat's been on here on YouTube on WardyNYM multiple times. Last offseason was the first time we had him on the lockout. Definitely had for some fun discussions. So, Pat, it's always a pleasure to have you on, my man. And we're looking forward to talking to you again soon, okay?
Thanks so much, guys. It was a blast. I appreciate you having me on.
Yep. All right.
Thanks
see you later,
a lot,
Pat. Have a good one.
Pat.
All right, shout out to Pat for coming on. Always appreciate that. Again, it's a new experience for him, again, being at the winter meetings for the first time. He's only been on the beat for the Mets for just like over a year, I would say. Like, he's fairly new working with Sports Illustrated. So he's definitely been having a good time. Even had a chance to meet him in person a couple times at games this past season. Great guy. But before we wrap up the show, guys, I guess any final closing thoughts on the Mets? You know, again, it's going to be a busy week for them. It wouldn't be all that surprising if this isn't even the one show we have this week, should any other breaking news happens that's warranted of a live podcast. So I guess starting with you, Joe, what's your anticipation for the remainder of the week? You know, the Mets, there's a lot of stuff going on with Brandon Nimmo, Benintendi, but I feel like this is my gut feeling. So let me know if you guys feel the same or different. I think they're going to land another starting pitcher in the next 48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it would certainly be smart. Maybe not 48, but at some point this week, I definitely see that happening. Mm-hmm. My biggest takeaway right now, and I've kind of been consistent with this stance all off season, Brandon Nimmo is the most important guy to sign or re-sign. Doesn't matter. You know, I said it a few weeks ago, and you know, I don't want anyone to say, oh, I'm just mad at deGrom because he left. I've been consistent in saying that Brandon Nimmo was more important to re-sign than Jacob deGrom. So you bring back Diaz, you bring back Nimmo, and then you're replacing Jake with Verlander. You see who you replace Bassett with. The bullpen has to get better. But all in all, bring back Nimmo, and then, you know, minor upgrades at some other spots. And I think that this is a team that, you know, can contend to win a World Series with or without Jake. To me, if they don't bring back Brandon Nimmo, they've got way more serious problems.
What about you?
I think they need to get athletic. I think Nimmo is a part of that, but he doesn't steal bases, so that's an issue. But I think there's areas for this team to improve by continuing to be versatile and getting more versatile. At the start of last year, I thought they were on their way there. Right now, I'm just not seeing it again. The roster isn't, you know, in that space because realistically, you know, Escobar is a third baseman right now, and maybe not much else. He can play a little bit of second base, fine, but McNeil's pretty much there. Are you going to put McNeil in the outfield? I'd rather have him at second base every day. You just end up getting locked into a lot of different lineups. Could I still put him in the outfield at times? Yes. So that's one way. But where are your guys who are going to, you know, steal you bases, play amazing defense, and, you know, be not even just steal bases, but be great base runners, do the little things. Like, they just don't have a ton of that. They really don't. Nimmo was one of those guys, though, outside of stealing bases. And so I think I'm with Joe. You gotta lock up Nimmo in center field. I don't see any other center fielder that I really love. I mean, I love Cody Bellinger, but you can't take that chance with the starting center fielder. That just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And he is athletic, and he gives you the opportunity to steal bases. He gives you the opportunity for power. Is he going to hit above $150? I don't know. So that's scary as heck. There's so many unknowns with this team right now. I think they have a lot of work to do. I don't think it's just a few pieces, or I think there's a lot of work to do on this roster. They need to find ways to score more runs. They need to find ways to lock down that bullpen, and they still need a starter or two. So to me, there's just so much to do that over the next couple of days, they better just lay the groundwork for everything that they need to get done. I think they make a trade sooner than later. I think they've got to be exploring that trade market to see what value could be out there, what guy really could be had for next to nothing. A team who, you know, has a guy who's making some money or about to make some money, and they're not even looking for that many prospects. They're just looking to unload that money. Hey, Mets, take him for us. Great. You don't have to give us much back. That's fine. I think that's the kind of thing. Again, we talked about this last year. That's what they ended up, you know, trying to do with Bassett and others. I think they're going to have to try to find those kinds of deals again. I think this week they get that groundwork done. Hopefully that happens sooner than later so we can start to see this roster take shape.
Yeah, I love the trade talk aspect as well. I think that's something that is not getting any talk about. And I do agree that if and when it happens for the Mets, it'll be very under the radar. It's just going to happen. You know, that's what I think. I don't think there's going to be much build up to it the same way that you see in free agency. Mets have been doing pretty damn well for the most part since Cohen came in with a lot of different signings and trades of, you're really not hearing too much. Like, we have speculation all day of the week, and maybe we were right, and players that realistically look like fits, but a lot of stuff's been hush hush. So I agree with you. Yeah, I definitely foresee a world where they get some deals done. It's a question of who. To your point, I don't think Brian Reynolds is happening. So I think he'd be awesome. Yes, I think if you're going to replace Brandon Nimmo, he's far and away your best option out there in the trade market and free agent market for that matter. But I just don't see a world.
The problem is he's not a great center fielder.
No,
you know what I mean.
He's a worse defender.
He's a corner
Nimmo,
he's a corner outfielder.
Yeah, he's the worst defender for Nimmo, who's drastically gotten better the past 2 years. And two, he's younger, controllable, and I could see him going to like the Yankees.
Got
the
some
Padres.
power too.
He does have some power. He's a really appealing player for sure, and he's definitely going to get dealt at some point to the highest bidder. But overall, Brandon Nimmo, I think when it comes down to not only his performance but his character. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but he's the most selfless player imaginable, and he's just that type of player that I feel like you want on a winning team. And again, maybe this is just the homer in me talking about knowing him so well as a player, who he is still driving that damn Altima that he's had for like a decade. But he's just that type of player, that good vibe presence, that team first. It's always about the team first. It has never been about Brandon Nimmo when he steps on the field. It's always about the Mets. And that's something that I greatly appreciate about him. And those are the type of players that you need to win and have success at the MLB level. It's as simple as that. And I think he's someone that should certainly be heavily considered on bringing back at absolute minimum. Because, I mean, if we find ourselves in a world where both Brandon Nimmo and Jacob deGrom are not Mets next year, when they looked like essentially priorities number 1 and 2 heading into the offseason, aside from Diaz, that would be absurd. And something that I, as a fan, am not going to be comfortable with. Because how are you going to replace him properly? But before we get out of here, guys, I do want to address two donations here in the live show. Pat Metz, thank you so much for the dono. He says, I appreciate Anthony's view, but Rodon's most innings was 178 in 2022. Don't blame the Mets for not wanting to go 5+. Check in with Trevor Williams as the 6th starter bullpen was an asset. I agree with Trevor Williams. I would love him back. I think he's just going to be too expensive for the Mets, unfortunately. Do you guys agree or disagree with that?
I think you hit the nail on the head, Wardy. I think he's going to cost more than he really realistically should. But I'd love him back in that swing role.
Yeah.
Would he be too expensive if you signed Rodon for $10 million less a year? I'm not going to let it go. I'm just telling you, this is the kind of stupid stuff that you could do with that. If you're going to say it's too expensive, then don't sign Verlander. That's all I'm saying.
But independent of the starting pitching situation, I've always thought that Williams was going to be overpaid because of the great year he turned in last year, as opposed to who he really is.
He's not going to get paid starter money. Nobody's going to think this guy is going to be there 4 or 5. They're going to say he's a swing guy, and he's not going to get paid. He's not going to get paid $15 million a year. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Over under 10.
It's a good number.
Yeah, because I wouldn't give him more than 6.
No, I'll take under.
Okay, because if you can get Trevor Williams on a 2-year, $12 million deal, I would give him that.
I would say 216.
That's pushing it for me. And this was all independent of any starter that they signed.
That's $8 million a year. That'd be free if you signed Rodon instead of Verlander.
I would do 2 for 18, 2 for 16, like Rex said. I wouldn't even bat an eye with it. I would get Trevor Williams at minimum $8 million a year. People don't seem to realize just how important he is for this team, especially with.
I don't think he can replicate it. I don't think he replicates the same thing he did as a Met. I really don't. I love Trevor Williams. Don't get this.
A Met elsewhere,
I'm gonna fall into this.
Or just
when I faced Trevor Williams in 2016 or 17 in the minor leagues, I thought this dude was filthy. He was with the Pirates throwing 96, 97 sinkers, cutters, curveballs, sliders. He was so good. I thought he was going to dominate. Not throwing that hard anymore, and obviously not quite the same pitcher, but he's good. I don't know that he's going to do it again. That's all I'm trying to say.
Would you argue that he has a higher likelihood of doing it again with the Mets next year at minimum than Adam Ottavino?
Say that again. Sorry, I'm getting some family texts.
Oh, no worries. We're going to wrap up the show in a second, I would say. But would you argue that Williams is more likely to have another strong year with the Mets versus Adam Ottavino?
So basically, you're making me pick one of these guys, right?
Yeah.
I would take Williams over Ottavino. I think he has the opportunity to repeat what he did more so than Ottavino does. Yeah.
I would too, because Scherzer and Verlander are probably going to start a combined 54 out of 64 starts that you'd expect. So I would go Williams too for that reason, because he could slot in for 10 starts if needed.
I see 1,200 here in the live stream with the donation. Always talking about Thomas Szapucki. He's been talking about Thomas Szapucki as the inside joke literally since the day that man took the mound in San Francisco. Thank you so much for the donation, brother. I appreciate that. And
that was a good start, right? That was a good start, right?
Yeah.
I think it went well, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
ERA of 54.
That's
Funny.
a very good comment. Dylan Moore is fantastic. I got to see him in spring training with Atlanta.
I actually agree.
He's a great kid too. He's a great person. I love that kid. I really like
him and Nimmo on the team and just lead the league in character.
I just don't know why Seattle would give him up, but still awesome.
I mean, if Seattle adds like a Michael Conforto, could it be more feasible?
Potentially. I mean, they have a glut of outfielders. I mean, I know So, I mean, he can play the infield too. I've seen him play the infield too.
Second base,
right? Those are the type of guys I want the Mets to get. If you're going to be
100%.
versatile, I want
100%.
give me more Jeff McNeil's. Basically, is what I'm trying to say here.
Well, I'm thinking Seattle goes out and signs Judge, and then Dylan Moore becomes available very cheap.
Who says no?
It happened in MLB The Show a couple months ago when I was playing. Seattle signed Judge, and I was like, "That's actually I would like that." Because I don't think the Mets are going to get him, and like I would really rather see him with Seattle than San Fran or the Yankees.
Yeah, I like Seattle. They're America's team now. I'm rooting for them. Aside from Paul Sewald's comments, I'm down. I'm down. But guys, I think that's going to do it. This was a whirlwind of an episode, longer than we should have done it per usual. So stay tuned. If we do have another live show this week, that'll be because breaking news happens that is warranted of an immediate discussion. But guys, make sure to check us out wherever you get your podcast for Bleav in Queens as always. And make sure to rate, review, all that great stuff. Also, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button here on YouTube. Greatly appreciate it. That's Anthony Recker, Anthony_Recker. Make sure to check him out on MLB Network every week. Same thing with Joe Sorrell. Make sure to check him out at the Joe Sorrell with the Sorrell Sports Talk Show. And of course, you guys know where to find me here on YouTube at WardyNYM. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. Mets got JV. Now let's see what's next for the team in Queens. We'll talk to you guys later. Have a great night, everyone.
I'm so glad I can see the chat now. I know